Hey guys, Jay here. Welcome to Models Memories Weekly, episode 80. Models Memories is a show about nothing and is filmed in front of a live studio audience. This is a show where I talk about my painting, modeling, and wargaming experiences from the week. Now you might be thinking to yourself, Jay, you put out 3 YouTube videos a week. How could you possibly have more to say? Well, I do, and here goes. This week, I want to talk about some old school Space Marines, what models I actually managed to get built, and a toy I might buy. But first, I would like to talk about this video's sponsor, Audible. I've been using Audible for years now, so I can tell people I read books when in fact they're actually being read to me. Audible is a great service with thousands of titles to choose from. As an Audible member, you get 1 credit a month that can be redeemed for any audiobook you want. A book I recently listened to was Day of Ascension by Adrian Tchaikovsky, narrated by Harry Myers. It's all about the much maligned Gene Stealer cult, who are always described as a nasty plague from a third-person perspective, but this book gives a first-hand look into the way of life for the cult of the Four-Armed Emperor, and you will find yourself rooting for them by the end of the book. If you type in audibletrial.com/EOB or follow the link in the description, you can start your 30-day free trial and get listening to some books today. Games Workshop threw a total blast from the past at us this week in releasing some old Space Marines as made to order. And I remember looking at these guys, boy, back in like 2014 when they still sold them on the Games Workshop web store. But these are some cool models. They are some, they were very specific, unique, basically count as captains is what they were. Each one is a little something special. Space Marine Captain, Master of Marches, Space Marine Captain, Master of Rites, Space Marine Captain, Master of Relics. But really what you would do is you would say like, oh, well, this guy who's screaming into a Voxcaster is really speaking to me. So I'm gonna buy him and paint him green to be the captain of my Salamander's army. But these models, what's cool about these models is that they are very unique and different. And so I think that they fulfill the role of a unique captain a little bit better than the current like Primaris Captain or Primaris Lieutenant that do have a little bit of posability and a little bit of options, but there's no amount of posability or options that can turn a Space Marine into a Space Marine reading a scroll that's being presented to him by a naked flying baby with the evil skull helmet. Like there's no bit for that in the box for the Primaris Space Marines. or a really cool plasma gun or a really cool combi plas with the kind of dish off of a Rhino tank and the Eye of Sauron. I don't know what's going on with the Space Marine Master of Relics. I mean, I guess the idea is like he's, when the Space Marines are like, I really need an artificer, a suit of artificer armor for this mission. The Master of Relics just looks at him and looks at his little sheet and then looks at him and he's like, I guess you can have some artificer armor. I like them a lot. It's sad that they're made to order. I mean, it'd be great if Games Workshop could keep every single model that they have ever created in stock and available for me to not buy, because I'm not really planning on picking any of these up. But it's cool. It's cool to see them back here. I suppose Space Marine Captain and Terminator armor is a little bit like whatever. We have lots of cooler Space Marines in Terminator armor now, and these Librarians are really classic. I think that they're all fine, but the Librarian in Terminator armor, the old resin one, I think is the best looking Librarian in Terminator armor that Games Workshop has ever made, rivaling the Librarian from Space Hulk. This model is so cool. Do I buy this model now so that I have it for my Grey Knight army? Because it's only gonna be available for like another week. Is Games Workshop gonna FOMO me into spending 35 bones? Maybe. I need to think about it. I really do love that model. I think it's a lot better than the current plastic Librarian and Terminator armor. I really love the sheer size of that book. I mean, that book, like there's coffee table books that are like, what are the coffee table books? Like 12 to 14 inches like long, like they're pretty big. That book is probably a dining room table book, like 4 feet wide. I absolutely love it. It's super cool looking. And it makes perfect sense for the Librarians who are in charge of keeping track of all the lore and the history of the chapter that they're serving with. So yeah, Librarian and Terminator armor made to order. That model is really tempting me. And speaking of old Games Workshop models, Games Workshop also came out with some new models in the form of some skeletons. dive right into the war for Gnarlwood's Warrens in the new Warhammer Underworlds, or Warhammer Underpants as it is called by cool people. These skeletons look great. They look fantastic. The paint job on them is a little bit dark and desaturated, but I mean, I've seen tons and tons of people paint up the skeletons that I think they made their first appearance in the Warhammer Underworlds, Warhammer Underpants, Dark City, Curse City, Curse City, Curse City skeletons. I mean, every super mega pro painter in the world was painting those models with some beautiful either non-metallic metal gold or like almost chrome non-metallic metal silver. So these models I'm sure are gonna join the ranks, and these would look really, really good as like captains, lieutenants, and sergeants for the old Games Workshop skeletons, the Death Rattle skeletons. Maybe you get a few boxes of Death Rattle skeletons and you paint them up a little bit more muted, a little bit more, not boring, but desaturated. And then you have these guys a little bit louder and prouder standing right in front of the hordes of skeletons. And the Right King. The Right King is a model that Games Workshop has sold for ages. I think it's actually been available to take in a bunch of different armies over the years, and it's a fan favorite of pro painters. The Right King, these new Underpants skeletons and the Death Rattle skeletons would make a really, really cool army. Games Workshop also showed off a brand new miniature, a very unique miniature for Warhammer Day or Warhammer Fest or Warhammer Anniversary. It's the 35th year of 40K for Games Workshop. And so they have made a unique model. And one thing I really like about this miniature is it's essentially a diorama or a statue, where usually figures are just, standing on a small base ready to be played with. This model really is kind of meant for display only. A lot like the old Warhammer TV, you pay for the year subscription, you get a miniature, the Vinikar Assassin standing in the kind of ruined statue head of a Sister of Battle. It was a really, really cool model. And so I really like Games Workshop doing pieces like this because I think it really lends itself to painting. But this is just a variant of the Emperor's Champion stabbing an orc. It's a really, really cool model. It's got great energy. It's got great posing. I love the dead orc. I guess he's dying. He may not quite be dead yet. But yeah, this model is really, really cool. But it looks to be on a 50mm base, at least potentially. No, it's probably a 50mm base. I don't think it's a 60, where the normal Emperor's Champion stands on a 40mm base. I don't think base size is the most important thing in the world, although this model is huge compared to the normal figure to play in games of Warhammer 40,000. So I think this model really is going to be only for as a statue for painters. But as a statue for painters, I think it's really, really nice. Games Workshop's really weird when they paint stuff because they go with the classic heavy metal style, which is, wash, base coat, highlight, which is fairly easy for people to replicate. And so you see that on like the orc and on the armor of the Space Marine. But then you see like really, really nice stippled non-metallic metal on the sword. And like Games Workshop does not have a tutorial on how to do that. It is very, very difficult and very hard. And like if you only look at the sword, it looks like a super pro painted model. And then when you kind of zoom out a little bit, you see it's a little bit more standard Games Workshop heavy metal, which is a style kind of meant to be easily seen and somewhat easily replicated. But the painter just decided to get jiggy with it on the sword. But it's a neat model. I don't think I'm gonna be camping out at any Warhammer stores to pick this up. I think it's really cool, but I already have an Emperor's Champion, so neat. Good job, Games Workshop. And speaking of things that would look really, really cool on my desk, is a new JoyToy action figure. None of the JoyToy figures have really jumped out at me as something that I absolutely need, especially since they're just kind of regular Games Workshop sculpts just scaled up a little bit. And so I always figure like, well, if I want that sculpt, I'll just buy it as a plastic figure. That way I can take it in like wargames. But the new JoyToy Castellan Crow is really, really cool. Number one, he's kind of just a normal Grey Knight. Like Castellan Crow is a lot more ornate and ornamented than the regular Grey Knights. And I think that that level of ornateness, blown up to the size of an action figure, actually looks like how a normal Grey Knight would probably look in real life. So, you know, if I just take his little Castellan crow head and then snap it off and then put on the included helmet, I think that this will make a really, really good standard issue Grey Knight. And I like the Grey Knights. I'm working on a Grey Knight army. This guy would look so good. I think, depending on the price of this guy, how much are these things usually? Like $50? I don't even know. But if this guy is around that, I might pull the trigger. But if they come out with a Grey Knight in Terminator armor, that would be an insta buy. It's hard to believe that they haven't done that because it seems like they've already pumped out like 50 or so unique figures. But none of them have spoken to me. None of them have spoken to me really, except for this Castellan Crow. Yeah, it's a really, really cool model. Really, really cool Grey Knights. I would love to take this guy and just plant him on the desk and then open up that new Grey Knights XCOM game. That's really, really fun. I've really been enjoying it. Well, I haven't been enjoying it. I haven't played it in months and months, but I really, really enjoyed it. The couple of runs I did of that game. And speaking of things that are right in front of me, I actually found a friendly local game store that carries some really cool painting and modeling supplies. They have Reaper bases, which I got a big little blister of 20mm bases. These are just the cutest little bases. Yes, you are. I can't wait to put something on these. I think some things I have to go on 25s, which is like the smallest size of base that Games Workshop makes, especially for things like Kill Team. But I think for big 40K, there's a lot of units that are essentially just tokens, like the familiars for the Genestealer cult. And so I think those models that are just tokens, they don't actually really represent anything in game, those guys would look really, really good on these tiny little baby boy 20mm bases. I can't wait to give these a try and to put some models on these. They're just so little. Like, I've spent a decade knowing that the 25mm base is the smallest base that you can get, and now seeing these, which are substantially smaller, I really, really like them. But not just Reaper, they also had a pretty good selection of Green Stuff World, and so I finally got some fluorescent paints. I think fluorescent paints might be a huge dumb gimmick because I've seen some paint jobs that look pretty good with fluorescent paints, and then you put them under black light and they glow because their fluorescent paint reflects those light rays. But if the model doesn't look any different under normal lighting conditions, I feel like there was no point because you're not gonna play 40K at like a black light putt golf course where the models would look unbelievable. They're probably gonna look fairly normal, but maybe not. Maybe that little bit of extra reflectivity to these types of paints will add something. So I've got the whole set, I've got every color, and I'm going to paint some models with fluorescent paints to see what happens. But I'm very dubious that there's anything to fluorescent paints. Also, I love that this figure that they painted on the cover is not fluorescent. It doesn't really demonstrate anything fluorescent. It's actually not. No, I think it is a painted miniature. It might be a painted miniature. I'm dubious of this as well as these paints. But it has been something that I've been really wanting to try out. I have a couple of fluorescent Vallejo colors, and I've also been pretty unimpressed because they're incredibly thin, and so you need to mix them with other paints to get them to a workable consistency. And at that point, how much of that fluorescentness is still in the paint? But I'm excited. I'm excited to give it a try and to see what happens. Perhaps I will try it on these models that I built this week. Probably not though, because these, I think I want to go a different route. These are the Old Dominion Bone Golems for Clack Conquest Last Argument of Kings. A really, really fun war game. I'm gonna be using these for their skirmish war game called First Blood 2. Not to be confused with Rambo First Blood Part 2. These models are the size of dreadnoughts. They are really, really big, and they were really, really fun to put together. It's hard not to always compare everything to Warhammer 40K because they're kind of the standard. When Games Workshop does something, it tends to be that everybody else does that thing too, because usually it's a pretty good idea because, you know, they've been around for 35 years and they've constantly been expanding and improving. Except for maybe in like 2012 when they deleted all of their social media. And then just decided to like have radio silence for a couple of years. That was a weird time in Games Workshop's history. But now they have a Facebook page again, so all is right with the world. But these bone golems are really, really fun. They're just like a conglomeration of different detritus and lots of skulls from the battlefield. And I just love the idea of the Old Dominion, these Roman legionary zombies. They're pinned down or they can't quite muster up enough power to win the day. And so they just cast a spell on a castle that's fallen down. And all of a sudden, these things just wander out of the wreckage of that castle, ready to wreak havoc. These models are super cool. And I think that they're going to be a lot of fun to paint. I'm going to try to use the airbrush as much as I can, because it could be difficult to paint these if you do the classic like Games Workshop heavy metal style of base coat, wash, highlight, because there's a lot of different elements on these guys. You've got cloth, wood, bone, steel, marble, and like, I guess like weapons and helmets and armor. And so if every single thing had to be picked out, base coated, washed, and highlighted, it would be hours and hours per guy. But I think if I use the airbrush and I get really selective with my paint application, I think these guys will paint up really, really quickly and be really nice. I am really excited to have some proper clack models ready to rock and roll. I painted a selection of heroes, but now it's time to get into the rank and file. Although this isn't really a rank and file, it's more of an elite. And not only are these horrible blobs of skulls and dirt, but also I like that every single one of them has like a tombstone for a face. It just adds another weird, like macabre, evil element. This kit came with a lot of extra bits, and I could see using these weird sarcophagus bone imagery on some 40K dreadnoughts, which is great because I actually do have a bunch more 40K dreadnoughts to put together and paint. So yeah, I really, really am excited for the Old Dominion from Clack, Conquest Last Argument of Kings. These models are really cool, and you know what else is really cool? That's right, our Patreon. This month for our patrons, we have some grim gothic turret terrain pieces and the eye-catching Warriors of Paradise with 17 unique head options, all hosted by Comics, Games, and Things. If you sign up, there's a welcome pack that includes Dawn of War Space Marine, Imperial Guard, and Eldar terrain. We also make one extra episode of Eons of Battle every single week where we take a look at viewers' models and we give them some critiques and helpful ideas on how to improve. And every single week we all hop into a Discord and we have a live Discord hangout where we all chit-chat the night away. We also have merch, link in the description. When I started this episode, I didn't really have any plans to spend money, especially since I already have spent a little bit of money. But now I'm thinking I probably need that Grey Knight toy and that limited edition Space Marine Librarian. Or maybe I don't know. Bye-bye.